In this training video, we're going to have a look at how to add equipment to Gearlog. Specifically, we'll take a look at the variety of fields of information that you can populate, and also we'll take a look at how you can adjust those fields to make the platform more simpler or more complicated, depending on how you need it. Let's start on the equipment page. This is the home of your asset register within Gearlog, and it's broken into two parts. The blue box is a filter panel that you can use to control how much information you see on the page, and below that, sorted by activity and then by category, you'll see all of your equipment. Let's have a quick look at the filter panel, and let's look at adding some equipment. The most useful filters are up here at the top. So very common would be to want to filter to a particular location. So to filter by site, only seeing equipment at a certain place. Another very common one, only show me equipment that's on a certain list. Other common filters, zoom into certain particular activities, down into particular categories of equipment, and there are a number of other filters below, but those most common ones are up there at the top. Once you've set your filter, and that's very useful when you've got many hundreds or thousands of pieces of equipment and you want to control how much you see on the screen, you're ready to start managing your equipment down below. If you want to clear your filter at any time, it's the blue X in the filter panel. Quite commonly missed is the ability to hide and show your empty categories. This is very useful if you want to open an empty category for the first time and add some equipment, but not have the display cluttered up in the future. So click it once and it will show you your empty categories, ready for you to add new information to. If you don't need to see your empty categories, click it the other way and you'll only see populated categories. If multiple people are working in the platform at the same time in real time and you want to see each other's changes, then the curly synchronize arrow can also be useful. Generally you won't need this, but if you do want to force a refresh of the platform, then synchronize in the filter panel is a great way to do that. Let's look at adding some equipment to the platform. For no reason other than it's the first category on the screen, let's grab the category of belay devices. There are three ways to add assets to Gearlog. The fastest way is to use the importer on the tools menu, and we have a separate training video specifically geared to that. So if you're looking to import from a spreadsheet of data, go have a look at that training video. Two other ways to add equipment. The next quickest after importing would be to take an existing asset, click this curly arrow on it, which will clone it, copy and paste it, and make a new one the same, ready for you to just change the serial number, change the color, whatever's different on it. And then finally, the slowest way is to hit the plus icon at the top of the category and add a new piece of equipment starting from scratch. We're going to do that so that you can get a feel for the categories of information stored within an asset entry in Gearlog. Let's hit plus to get started. Out of the box with Gearlog, there are always 4 things that you must tell us and then a huge number of optional ones. And those optional ones you can choose to make mandatory should you wish, or choose to hide, completely up to you. And we'll have a look at how you can do that on the settings menu. Let's begin by populating this. We must tell it a category. We need to tell it who manufactured it. As noted below, just drop us an email or a message in the platform if you see any missing manufacturers. Give it a name. And finally, give it a status. Let's just briefly discuss our status lifecycle. Equipment comes into your organisation as not yet in use. So that's brand new in the packaging. You break it out and use it and it's good and will quite rapidly progress to being a monitor state in which it's seen some service history but is perfectly safe to use. Of course, unfortunately, equipment does go missing. That's a common status. Any equipment that's been loaned out, you will find it in an on loan status. The end state for your equipment is either retired, as in you check it, you're no longer comfortable with it, or it's end of life and you retire it, or quarantine means it's not fit for purpose, but you may send it out for repair and then return it into stock when it's had some remedial actions. And of course, sold for those of our users who actually sell equipment, as well as just using it. You'll notice the very important retired option, that's the end state for your equipment. We don't delete from the platform. Most of your users will not have the delete permission, although your admin account will do. And that's because the end of life for equipment is retired, preserving its audit history for the future. It'll be hidden from the screen, but there is a filter to bring back required equipment if you need to. Should you wish to take a photograph of the equipment, you can do so now. That helps to make the platform A, look attractive, and B, can help with visual recognition when trying to identify a piece of equipment. It's completely optional, and the real value perhaps of photographs is when conducting an inspection and you need to take a photograph of an issue on a piece of equipment. But should you want to, as you go, you can upload or take photographs of the equipment to store with its asset register entry. And then below we have a bunch of optional sections which you can choose at the field level to make mandatory or to remove if you want. Let's look at each of these to get a sense for them. Inspection. Inside the inspection there's a number of different fields become possible. The most obvious one there is next inspection due. Let's just talk a little bit about the difference between inspecting, testing and servicing. If we take a complex example of a piece of equipment like a defibrillator, an AED, for such a piece of equipment we would recommend that you turn on all three schedules. And to give you a feeling for the difference between them, what do those look like? So inspecting an AED, you'd be checking has it got pads and backup pads, both sets of pads in date, is there a razor blade in the bag, so on and so forth. If you had to use that defib, would it be fit for purpose? Functional testing or testing, you hit a button on the defib or you pop it open, it'll say green, rescue ready, or it'll give you an error code, perhaps it's too cold or the battery's no longer serviceable. And servicing, every year the manufacturer will take away the piece of equipment and change the battery in it, or they'll tell you how to do it. So for something like an AED, you're going to turn on all three of those schedules. For an auto belay, you may well turn on servicing for the manufacturer and then a daily inspection or a daily check. Motor vehicle, you may well only turn on servicing and record its MOT. So you can mix and match those three schedules as you want for the level of each piece of equipment, and bear in mind the schedule won't be activated unless you provide a date for it. So this piece of equipment will next be inspected at the end of January, but will never be flagged for test and never be flagged for service. Custom inspections are a super useful tool for extending gear log, and we have a specific training video on that. So you're interested in custom inspections, go have a look at that video. A couple of other useful options in inspection. Some of your equipment may well fall under a legal requirement to check it and some may not. And if you need to discriminate between that, there's an option there to do that. And some of your equipment may actually need a daily check. We're thinking here perhaps things like an auto belay where you're going to give it a daily pull test. You can also flag your equipment for daily checking. Let's keep it simple for our training one. We'll give this device a next inspection date and move on. Identification is a very important section. You need to tell us where that piece of equipment lives. So we will pop this in the equipment store at our climbing centre. Give it a serial number. You can either type those in manually if you make them up yourself, or if on the settings menu, using our serial number format tool, you've told Gearlog what your serial numbers look like, you can have the platform generate that for you automatically. If it's a set of similar items, then you can enable this option. Let's make sure you use that correctly. What we don't want you to do is to do asset entries like I've got 12 climbing harnesses. Each of those should be an asset tracked individually. This is useful for consumables. So let's take an example of a plastic box full of camping cups. There should be 50 in there. You're not going to track every cup individually. You're going to track that as a single asset, but you'd like to know that there ought to be 50 present in the set, and the last time you checked there were actually only 46 in the set. Very good for things like medications, box of paracetamol with 12 in, currently 6 in it, boxes of batteries, food products, anywhere where you've got a consumable element but you don't want to track each one separately as a separate asset. We'll leave that one off for ours because it's a piece of PPE equipment that we want to track as an asset. Just take a moment here to note that Gearlog can operate with barcodes, QR codes and near field dots, either through our app or through a scanner that you attach and pair to your laptop. We have a whole training video on the use of QR codes and barcodes, so if you're interested in that, go check out that training video. But just note for here now that if you were to scan a barcode or QR code on a piece of equipment, that long number would be stored here as an additional ID associated with that piece of equipment. Attributes allow you to provide more qualitative and quantitative description of your equipment in a bit more rigour. Different categories would have different attributes. So for example, a rope would have length and diameter. You don't need to fill this in, completely optional. If you do, they will be added after the name of the piece of equipment and provide a more structured way to model your equipment. Gearlog also supports usage tracking, and you'll have seen that if you've looked at the video related to usage tracking or our video related to loaning equipment. Even if you're not using our usage tracking feature, it's very useful if you can tell us when you started using it. And for such equipment that has a finite working life, we will start the clock ticking on that and let you know when it may be end of life. If you have any equipment that has to go through a maximum number of uses and then some kind of a reset, so for example, batteries in night vision goggles often are used a certain number of times and then disposed of after that number of uses. You can set up those attributes here. Gear lists, we have a whole video course on that and you're probably very familiar with them. If you want to add this piece of equipment to a list as you're working, you can pop it straight on. If you're interested in more in how you can use lists to organise your equipment and to facilitate inspections, then check out that video course. The manufacturer section has a number of possible fields you can include. Certainly a very useful one we would suggest is the batch number. That's very useful for product recalls, and it's also very useful for finding out more information about your products online. Another very useful setting on this one would be the recommended working life. So if a piece of equipment, and some types of PPE do have this, have a recommended working life under normal operational use, you can combine that with our start of use date to start tracking the lifespan of the equipment and get an alert when it's likely to be end of life. In terms of other manufacturer information, serial number is a very useful ID for searching, and you can use the manufacturer's serial number as your own serial number inside the platform if you want. Manufacturer's part numbers. If you have equipment that has a warranty period, you can record that. If you have medication and food products, they're not going to have a working life, they're going to have a specific end of life date. You can record that and we will flag the product as end of life when it gets to that expiry date. If you'd like to attach any other manufacturer information to this product, either photographs that you've taken, example its certificate of conformity, or online links to that product, here's the section where you can put those in. Down here underneath the financial section, we generally recommend that it's really useful if you included the value of the item. Note that you can change your currency on account and profile to change it to the currency relevant to your country. Including value is very useful because we can combine that with our end of life report and let you do future projections for the value you'll need to assign in your budget for end of life equipment replacement as you go into subsequent financial years. Where you purchased it can be useful for reprocurement, so you know where you got it from. If you would like to track depreciation, then you can also mark that although you purchased an asset for a certain amount, it's now only worth a lesser amount to you due to depreciation. There are a number of other financial fields that you can also include, specifically budget codes, contract numbers, invoicing, leasing, all of those are very useful. If you are also running another asset management system in parallel, and this asset is tracked in that one too, then the additional identifier here at the bottom will let you record the code or identifier used in your other asset management system, so you can link and jump between the two platforms. One final useful one here, and it's useful if you're using our platform for loaning or reservations, is you can exclude certain items from loaning. So for example, if you're using Gearlog both for your facilities management, so fire extinguishers and PAT testing, water testing and so on, you don't want those to appear as loanable items when people are booking equipment out, so you would mark those as not being available for loan. And then finally, at the very end, a note section for any other information you want to record. There's a large number of fields there, but just recapping the most useful ones we most commonly see populated would be the value of the asset, certainly its working life, if that's relevant to it, and the manufacturer's batch number. Generally, we'd like you to record when you first started using it. It's generally very important to put a location for it, where you'd expect to find it, and to give it a unique serial number and or a barcode or QR code associated with it. And of course, turn on inspection, testing and servicing depending on your own needs, and then the 4 mandatory pieces of information. Hopefully that's given you a sense of the breadth of information you could capture. What you may be thinking is, I don't need more than 10% of those fields, and that seems to make the platform perhaps more complicated than you need. And the solution to that is simply to head over to the settings menu and you're looking for the option Gear Fields. This will present to you the same optional sections we just looked at, And for every field in each section, you have the ability to decide what to do with it. For example, in the financial section, you might say, when did you purchase it? That should be mandatory, and you would like to force your users to fill it in which case you will change it to being shown and mandatory. Whereas depreciation, if you're not using that, there's no point showing that field, so you may choose to set that to not shown. Work your way through each of the sections, deciding what to do with each field, and when you've finished, save that to reflect it on the platform. That's a very, very good way to help Gearlog be as simple as possible for your users by only showing them the equipment information that they actually need to populate for your specific organisational needs. Hopefully this video in its totality has given you a good sense of how to add Gearlog assets, what sort of options you have when populating that information, and also how to adjust the platform to make it the right size for your needs.